I will tell you, there is an excellent documentary out there on Netflix. It's called Heal. I think it's on Netflix. Heal. It was the first time somebody explained to me from a physiological standpoint, what happens when you meditate? What happens when you do yoga? What happens when you change your mindset? It is releasing hormones and chemicals in your body that actually affect some of this chronic disease and stuff that's going on here, whether it's hypertension, PTSD, depression, all that stuff.
Hey guys, don't forget to check out the Street Cop Training Conference, April 23rd through the 28th, 2023 at the Gaylord Opryland Resort and Convention Center. It's going to be a great experience. 5 career-changing days, some of the most profound speakers in the industry. Guest speakers include Rob O'Neill, the guy who killed Bin Laden, Kyle Carpenter, the youngest living Congressional Medal of Honor winner, Fox News host Tommy Lahren, Navy SEAL American war hero Jason Redman, Sheriff David Clark, Sheriff Mark Lamb, and Sheriff Wayne Ivey. You'll also spend time with all of our Street Cop instructors at this event Monday through Friday. We'll have a great lineup of courses in addition to our great speakers. It will be a week that you will not forget. You'll be thankful you came. You don't want to miss out. Check out streetcop.com on how to register. If you're going to use the room code, make sure you book it from Sunday through Friday. That's what the code's good for, and it's about half the price of the regular rate. But those rooms are running out, so make sure you sign up now. We'll see you there.
111, 110.
Training to be a street cop.
Hey guys, welcome to this episode of Street Cop Training Podcast. I'm your host, founder, and CEO of Street Cop Training. My name is Dennis Benino, and I have with me today a man on a mission doing great things for the world. He's including law enforcement, hence he's on the podcast. We'd have him on anyway because he is a manly motherfucker as I look at him here on the screen. But none other than Ray Murphy. And I'll let Ray Murphy explain to you his organization, what he does, his background. And I'd like to also know your test level because I got to tell you, I don't know how much older you are than me, but you look like a fucking specimen, Ray.
Well, I'm not going to divulge my age, but we'll see how it goes.
Give us some hope. How about this? Were you born in the era that began with a 7?
Yes.
Okay, that's not bad, right? That's not. I'm an early 80s guy. I'm 81. People know I'm 41 years old.
Well,
right?
I was in the Marines and played in the desert the first go around. That should give you an idea how old I am.
Oh, you're probably not that much older than I am. Are you still in your 40s?
52.
You look great, dude. Can we just, before we go into who you are, like, how the fuck do you look like that at 52? Just constant working out and eating correctly?
Well, that's part of it. That's for sure.
What's the other part? Like, just is it the psilocybin mushrooms?
It's a secret sauce.
Nice, dude. All right, Ray, tell us who you are, man. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Ray Murphy. I'm the owner of several companies. I started Koru K9 a long time ago. So I've got a dog training company, fixing dogs behaving badly. I also started HRD Police K9. I run that with my business partner, Ted Summers, who also runs Working Dog Radio. It's another podcast. We're out there running high-risk deployment seminars around the country for existing police K9 teams. And I guess I decided that wasn't enough on my plate, so I started a 501c3 called the Warriors Healing Network. And that we are sending combat veterans and police officers with PTSD down to Costa Rica to do Ayahuasca ceremonies and also give them the prep work and the integration work when they return. So I've got a whole heck of a lot of stuff on my plate, but it's all stuff that I think is very important, especially the 501. We're brand new out there, and we're just trying to get the word out there that there are other options than the existing status quo for PTSD treatments, which I found personally are mostly ineffective. And if you're dealing with the VA, absolute garbage. So,
how about your early life into your military career and who you were and what you did and all that jazz?
Yeah, for sure. I grew up outside of Chicago, in Naperville, Illinois, and a pretty tumultuous childhood. We had a lot of violence in the household, and that all came to a head when I was in high school. Like right when I graduated high school, I basically left home, didn't talk to the parents since, and I was basically homeless for about 8 months. Hopping from couch to couch, just partying, doing nothing productive with my life. So I actually decided to go to the Marines. So that's when I kind of turned my own life around. So I spent 4 years in the Marine Corps. I was an 0331 machine gunner. I spent most of my career in the Marine Corps. Was 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines STA platoon, so I was with Scout Snipers. Like I told you before, I played around with the desert the first go around, Desert Shield, Desert Storm, but that was a long time ago. From there, when I graduated, I went to Illinois State University. I was a criminal justice major. I thought I did want to go into some kind of law enforcement at some point, and then I realized they don't make any money. So I decided to go the private sector, and that's how I didn't end up actually becoming a cop or something like that. During that time, I also became a skydiver and a base jumper, which I've done for well over 20-something years, but also caused a hell of a lot of heartache in my life and led to some of my own PTSD. During that 20-year stint, I did multiple world records in skydiving for large formations. I did a large formation jump in Moscow, base jumping off the Austin Kino Tower. And I've been all over the world base jumping, but that came at a price. I lost in excess of 34-something people. I literally had to sit down one day and think through all the people that I've lost in my life due to these sports. Most of them were fatalities within the skydiving and base jumping community. I had some that died within the military and things like that, but that is an absurd amount of death to deal with. And believe it or not, the thing that pushed it over the edge for me was the loss of a dog. I had a dog named Nero about 5 years ago who passed unexpectedly. He had a colonic torsion. And when he died, I felt different. I felt I didn't bounce back like I did before. I could accept, all those other deaths within the other contexts of base jumping and things like that. But when my dog died, for some reason, I just felt terrible. That's right about the time I got diagnosed with complex PTSD. And this is where I had to become my own expert because there's not a lot of information out there as to treatments that actually work for PTSD and how do you get it. For me, I always thought it was like a flash to bang type thing, meaning something bad happens, then bam, you got PTSD. I wasn't aware of this whole trauma stacking thing and this gradual erosion of your nervous system of all these traumatic events in your life that would lead up to one day you wake up and you just don't feel the same. So I get how a lot of people get kind of taken off guard that they have PTSD when they used to be able to handle all this stuff. I guess I could equate this to be, if you've seen a bunch of traumatic events on a regular basis and it's starting to become the norm and regular for you, you're going to have PTSD. It's common. It's just going to rear its head at some point in your life if you continue down this path and you don't try to right it yourself. So it's not something that'll just go away on its own. So that was definitely an eye-opening experience for me.
It's interesting you talk about experiencing trauma. And we talk about that a lot on this podcast. And it's important people hear this because sometimes I recognize trauma or I see an event that has unfolded. And recently, to keep it very vague, I'm aware of somebody who was at a very catastrophic event that was publicized, probably not hard to figure out which one it was. My response to that person immediately when they called me and said, hey, I was there, I said, I would suggest immediately trying to work with this, going to see a mental health professional and trying to work this thing out, because what I've experienced, what I've seen, in life is that people will continue to compartmentalize and suppress and push this stuff down. And essentially you're walking around like a ticking time bomb. You don't even know it's inside your body ready to go off. Yeah. And then when it does, you're literally just a complete meltdown, a disaster. And now you're picking up the pieces. And the crazy thing is, with no pun intended, if you had began to manage it and acknowledge that, okay, I'm not invisible, I'm going to manage this early on, you could prevent that from happening. Is that a true statement? I
would believe so. I mean, I wish I knew that when I started to experience all these traumas and started to actually address it and not to say, hey, I feel fine, it's not really bothering me. I might have been able to get away with some of these lower level treatments, things like EMDR, talk therapy and stuff like that, and not have to go the nuclear option of resorting to psychedelics and things that are really uncomfortable. But this is why, when people come out of the gate and they try to address this stuff, but they got some deep-seated trauma in there, complex PTSD, those lower level treatments tend not to work or do what they think it'll do for them. And that's a big problem. And when the treatment doesn't work, you're causing more and more frustration and anger. And that just builds and builds and builds. And obviously it's got to come to a head at some point. And usually it affects their lives in some terrible way, or people around them before they even try to address it. And at that point, you really only have a few options to make it work, in my opinion.
When you said the psychedelic route is uncomfortable, what do you mean by that?
So there's levels to the game. First off, they got organizations out there that are trying to legalize this stuff for PTSD treatment, like MAPS. I believe they just completed phase 3 trials of MDMA, and they're now studying psilocybin also for PTSD treatment. So very soon, you're probably going to see those things kind of normalize. You see a lot of ketamine out there in the world as far as treating depression and things like that. When you're dealing with things like ayahuasca, which is where we send people in Costa Rica to do these ceremonies, that is a Amazonian root and some leaves that basically work in conjunction with each other to basically strip down ego. And this is what happens when you sit down with a counselor, or you want to start talking about stuff. It's human nature to mask things and not be 100% honest with what's going on. But when you take this medicine, it's all coming up, whatever it was. I think I cried more in a week than I did in 30 years when I went to a retreat last February in a place called Rythmia, which is where we sent our treatment grant recipients. But when you take this stuff, number one, it doesn't taste good. And it's got a whole lot of uncomfortable side effects, things like purging and vomiting. And when you're dealing with this deep-seated trauma, of course, it's a serious emotional roller coaster that you're going through. So this isn't taking a couple mushrooms and going to a Dead concert. I mean, you're going down there and this is rough. This is heavy work that you're putting in. But I could tell you will feel like a different person when you come out of something like that.
As you talk about it, probably you don't know this about me because we don't know each other as of now. And now we will know each other forever, I hope. And we see each other. We can do one of those dab and high five and like fucking half hug things that we do. And like, it'll be great to meet you in person. And then I'll say to myself, hope Ray doesn't squeeze me too fucking hard because I don't want to get smashed. But one of the first questions I wrote down was, can everyone benefit from it? And the reason I ask this is because I'm somebody who is very open-minded to a lot of things that I think people quickly respond to. I would never do that. So unbeknownst to most people, I might talk about it, but when you look at me and a guy like me, you wouldn't think that I'm a meditator. I'm somebody who gets very much into my soul and purpose. I quintessentially fit that mold of Jersey guy, works out, bravado, very confident, but I'm a very deep person and I've learned to become that way. So for me, it intrigues me. Would it help somebody who maybe not be suffering? We all have trauma, right? I could agree with that. I'm not saying I certainly do not live a life free of trauma, and I continue to experience it nonstop. I think I'm fortunate enough to have a little bit of a resilient brain, probably more than other people. I'm a very calm person. But do you think somebody or anybody could benefit from going through one of these retreats and experiencing the native to the rainforest drug that does this?
Yeah. So let me be abundantly clear. The drug itself is just a tool. It's just a piece of the healing process. Okay. What they've done down there is set up these healing containers, meaning inside of a week, they've got a really tight program built around 4 ayahuasca ceremonies. What I would tell anybody considering going the psychedelic therapy route would be, number one, you have to be vulnerable. You have to be willing to make change in your life, because what that medicine is going to do is going to provide you with different thought patterns and point out ways that you can change your life for the better. But you have to be willing to make a change. Okay. That's not, you drink a cup of ayahuasca and you're good to go for the rest of your life. It doesn't work that way. You got to be ready to put in work. This is the reason why we vet people pretty heavily to make sure that they're on board and they understand this. But that being said, a lot of these people are at the end of the rope. They've tried several other therapies, whether it's talk therapy, EMDR, or they went the VA route. They got thrown a bunch of opioids and they got fucked up on those things. So if you were to try this, you'd have to go in completely willing to be vulnerable, willing to share what's happened in your past, willing to make change, and understand that that medicine is going to give you what you need, not what you want. Okay, and this is why it gets pretty hairy for people. They think they control freaks. You got to kind of let go and let it do its thing. But I could tell you what, I mean, I was in a room full of people hearing their different traumas, and it was very humbling. A lot of women there that were there for like sexual assault type things and deep-seated stuff. And I could tell you there are at least 2 or 3 people that would have killed themselves at the end of that week had that medicine not actually turned them around. And I could tell you what, at the end of a 7-day retreat, these people were walking around smiling and hugging people, and they had a different look to their face. And this isn't like 1 or 2 people. We're talking a bunch. And this is stuff I saw personally. And not to mention the way I felt. So I know, if this is going to do, it does a lot of good, but you got to have the right mindset. You got to treat it with respect. It's got to be done with the correct set and setting, meaning you got to know who's administering the stuff, what it is. And the one thing I did overlook, I will tell you this, is the spiritual aspect, I guess. I don't have a religious bone in my body, but spiritually, I can admit there's something bigger out there that none of us could truly understand. But when the shamans, the guys that curate this ayahuasca brew, are blessing this medicine and singing their Ikaros, which are basically these chants from the Amazon to help bring out the effects of the medicine, it'll make the hair on your arms stand up. I mean, you feel this power and energy in the room, and that's legit. So what I would tell people, the correlation here is with religion. You got to have this degree of faith and just trust and just hope something's going to happen for you. But with ayahuasca, try it. It's going to do what it's going to do, whether you believe it in or not. And it's going to work for some people, and everyone's going to have a different response to it, I would say. But there's ways to do it properly to get the most out of it.
You ever see it not working?
I haven't, personally. That being said, I'm sure there's people out there that it has not worked for. But again, I would have to question their preparation. Where did they do it? What was the setting? What did they do when they got back? I think a lot of the integration work, when I say integration, it's basically kind of counseling with somebody who has experience with psychedelics. So you have that ability to kind of unload and process some of these things that are very hard to articulate when you come back to the world. How do you go back and tell all your buddies you just saw all these crazy images and these things like that? They're just going to look at you like you're nuts. You got to have that support system in place to kind of be able to make sense of it. Think of this as like a snow globe. Your brain's stuck in this fight or flight loop when you got PTSD. If you can shake that thing up and that thing settles back down, you got to be able to realign those thought patterns in a positive manner. And that's really what integration work does when you come back from psychedelic therapy.
When you go there, and let's say at the end of the week, you are profound, you've had the healing, it did what you wanted it to do. Is there long-term proof that this works? Do you guys follow up? And is there any maintenance associated with it? Like when you leave, you're like, hey, listen, you got to keep up with this shit, right? Like you guys are here, you fixed it, keep waxing the car, keep detailing the motherfucker. You got a whole brand new car. Don't let it go sit out in the rain, in the mud. And tell me about it. I'm curious about that stuff.
Yeah. So again, we're a brand new organization. In fact, we just had our first treatment recipient come back on Sunday. He was a special forces guy. We were able to raise enough money to send him. Our second guy's leaving this Saturday. So, just for being around for about 6 or 8 months, we've able to raise enough to send 2 guys down there to get the treatment. So what our plan is going forward is to, set up kind of a support system that these guys can bounce things off each other, help other people or whatever going forward, and kind of grow this thing like a snowball, just keep pushing it through people who can actually use this help. To date, we've only sent 2 combat veterans. We haven't sent any police officers yet, but, we're hoping to change that a little bit. We want to make sure that we can deal with both of those communities because they're both kind of near and dear to my heart.
We actually have a group on Facebook called the Street Cop Survivors Club. We have one of the wives of one of our police officers who was significantly injured in the line of duty. She also started a spin-off group which is the Street Cop Survivors of the Family of Survivors Club. So it's the wives and siblings and whoever wants to come, because those are the often forgotten people who actually suffer just as badly mentally, and maybe even worse than the person who actually received this significant injury during the course of their duties. Now, when I started thinking about trying to support law enforcement and their mental health, this is the first route we went down. I had an idea. I heard the same thing over and over again from these guys. Nobody knows what it's like to have been shot in the line of duty. I go to combat veteran shit. It's not the same. It's just not. And I go to the VA. They're not, because we're welcome there. They're not understanding what we're saying to them. They don't get it. It's a different thing. I was in the war. I was shot at in the war. It's different. So I said to them in Atlantic City at our first conference, hey, you guys should I have this idea. I think it'll work out. I don't know, but essentially it's a peer support group. So there's 183 members in this group. It's a very small club, and we don't want more numbers in it, right? Like people who are, us getting bigger numbers in the Street Cops Training Survivors group is not a good thing. Yep. But if it does happen, we do have this peer support. So my suggestion is, just from one guy to another who does give a fuck, maybe trying to find a mental health therapist who wants to volunteer their time, who's appropriate for something like this, may be very difficult to find. What they found is a lot of comfort, a lot of relief from peer support. So maybe a group like a Facebook group, right, might do the trick there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's in the works for sure. I think one thing you got to consider, though, and something I also want to throw out there is, I think a lot of people, combat veterans or cops, whoever it is, sometimes this PTSD diagnosis becomes an identity. And they don't want to let it go. I'm a street cop. I got shot in the line of duty. You're never going to understand the stress I went through. Or same thing, vice versa with the combat veteran. And you know what? You hold on to that unhealthy identity. And who do you think you're screwing up around you? It's your family. It's your loved ones. Do they want to be around this miserable person their entire life? You really have to think about a bigger picture. And it's not just about you. And yeah, you've been through some shit, but a lot of people have too. And I think that's a lot of what I kind of picked up when I went down there, and just listening to other people's traumas. I learned to be empathetic. I think that's one of the first things that, especially police have to start to lose. And it's just by the nature of their job, how they're unsupported by their departments, unsupported by the public, unsupported by the media. You get hit with all ends there. So it's very hard to keep that positive outlook on life. But remember, your attitude and the way you carry yourself is affecting more than just you. So the families and your children and all this type of stuff. If you want to sit there and hold this identity, I'm the PTSD cop that nobody understands, that's not a healthy way to go through life, and you're never going to get better like that.
It's interesting. Later on in my life, in my 30s and now into my 40s, I learned a lot more about compassion. I wasn't raised in a household with a lot of compassion. I don't think anybody around me was either in my neighborhood. I don't think there was a lot of compassion. I can't recall of one person who I thought was a compassionate person like the way that I see things now. But one thing I wrote down when you were talking earlier is compassion. And it made me think, Ray, I know that you went through a lot. You've been through this whole thing, but going through PTSD, as difficult as it was, and going down and doing the ceremony, tell me about some of the blessings. And it's clear, obviously, you have a 501(c)(3), but what other blessings besides learning compassion and empathy did you really, and you could even address those, did you get from going through what you went through?
Yeah, I learned to live in the moment. Think about, especially this day and age, there's so much shit going on. Any single day you go on social media or the news or whatever, there's just the fucking world's ending. Everything's terrible, and then if you put that on through the lens of a police officer, it's even tenfold, right? So at that point, what I've learned is I can't control all that shit. I control what's in front of me. I can go walk my dog. I can choose to, stare at the trees and enjoy this beautiful weather we're having. But I can't control what's going on in Ukraine, right? So if I want to sit there and worry about every horrible thing that's coming down the pipe, and that's part of PTSD, right? It's hypervigilance. I'm going to be a miserable person my entire life. So that's one thing I've started. The other thing is just being mindful. It's taking a second out of my day to be grateful. So before dinner, I like to, my wife and I go through this exercise. We just say what we're grateful for. It could be simple. I'm grateful for, where we live or whatever, I mean, just something simple like that. These little teeny things. It doesn't have to be, you turn into this giant yogi and you start wearing beads and man jammies and all that type of stuff. That's not it, right? I mean, you do what makes you calm and what makes you happy, and it can be really simple. I will tell you, there is an excellent documentary out there on Netflix. It's called Heal. I think it's on Netflix. Heal. It was the first time somebody explained to me from a physiological standpoint what happens when you meditate, what happens when you do yoga, what happens when you change your mindset. It is releasing hormones and chemicals in your body that actually affect some of this chronic disease and stuff that's going on here, whether it's hypertension, PTSD, depression, all that stuff. Before, when you're just this angry guy and somebody's telling you, go do some breath work, go do some yoga, and you're like, okay, cool. You go do it, but you don't really think about why. And that's the first time it kind of clicked for me. I saw that. I'm like, okay, some people are, on the high end or the very rare end, people are sometimes curing things like cancer and things like that. Is very rare, of course. But what I'm saying is a lot of chronic disease can be addressed through those type of practices. And we live in such an unhealthy state these days, as far as humans are concerned. We got to go back to the way things were. If you look at the blue zones around the world, the biggest thing that's not there for them is stress. They're eating well, they're managing stress, they're getting sleep, they're doing everything that we aren't doing here in our current environments, especially in a career like law enforcement.
I'm going to go back a little bit, and you talked about something I think was interesting, and you actually made a point that contradicted your point as you were speaking about it. And you said the world's coming to an end, everything's a fucked up. If you're a cop, it's 10 times worse through the lens, and it's about how you see things. We have options in life. And I would actually argue that if you didn't have social media or the internet or a newspaper or television, and you functioned in this world without that stuff, you might not see things the same way. I'm not saying these things are bad. I'm saying acknowledge where some of our beliefs are being generated from. I'm not saying that the war in Ukraine isn't horrendous, and it's horrific, because it breaks my heart all the time. And I'm kind of in the same boat. I can't, in order to progress in my life, I just donated again to the war efforts in Ukraine. Like literally last week, I saw something that like tugged at my heartstrings, and I just grabbed my credit card and started sending money. Not that I sent $100 million, but I sent what I could. But a lot of us like to remain in those painful perspectives because it's popular. That's what human beings do, right?
Yeah,
but
it's familiar.
Right. And then you said, but, then I go and enjoy a walk with my dog, or I'm thankful for where I live. When we see the good things that we have in our life, it's interesting when you can begin to control that, right? You could say, my this broke and I got to pay for that. And this person's giving me a hard time, or I got this thing, it's not working. Do we ever get the thing that it works flawlessly and always say like, oh, thank God it worked flawlessly? So I had, this just comes to mind. I was putting up inflatable Christmas decorations. Your boy here has got a real thing with inflatable Christmas decorations. It's my fucking jam. The woman that I live with cannot stand them. I find them to be very pleasurable, and my children think it's fucking amazing. So I bought 10 new ones. I have a big front lawn, so I'm really trying to make it a menagerie. I want to be that place where people are like, we got to go see this asshole's house. So they have one. If I was in a different position financially at the moment, we have a lot of stuff going on, I would have bought, they have like a 45-foot Santa, like one you would see in front of like a mall.
You basically Clark Griswold, right?
Well, what's interesting is I'm not saying I had a great childhood, but my father, one thing he did was he put thousands of lights on our house. He was an electrician, and we had thousands of Christmas lights on the house. Like people would come and like I'd be I had a bunk bed, right? So people would come down the street and stop and look at our house. Cars lined up at the street. That was his thing. My father also put on a hell of a fireworks show every year. So it's so interesting. It meant so much to me that he did that and did the fireworks thing that now I do. As you can imagine, I have the biggest 4th of July party in the town that I live in. Hands down, nobody's fucking my 4th of July party. It's right. If you ever get the invite, don't ignore it. Where do you live now?
I live in Charleston, South Carolina.
All right. Maybe you want to take the ride up for it. It might be worth it. A lot of kids, though. I'm not going to lie to you. A lot of kids. We're not gonna be, there's some beer pong being played and shit, but it's a lot of kids, a lot of fun. About 250 people at my party, my backyard, and it's as chaotic as I can make it. I try to introduce something new, chaotic every year to make it more insane. And at this point now, I have to hire crews to come and clean up after it because it's so fucking nuts. But what I was saying is, I happened to take eight of these things out, 8 or 10 that I bought, and remember that everything I was going well. I'm blowing up on the 9th one. I plug it into the extension cord and it's not working. And I said, in my head, my first reaction, like everybody else's, is, oh, this thing's not working. Could you imagine? Like, I got to return it. I really needed this piece for the front. It completes the thing. It's going to look stupid without it. And then I said to myself, but the 9 other ones worked. So why am I complaining about the one that didn't? And the 9 other ones did. Why would I celebrate every time I plugged one in that it worked? And guess what? I laughed at myself. I go, I've been trying to work on this myself, of like not seeing the 1 or 2 times things suck versus all the great things we have in our life, all the great moments, to singing with my kids in the car, bring them to Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Oh, it's my favorite. I entice them with McDonald's because they're going to thank me later on when they're 9 and they're able to beat the shit out of anybody they want in their school. Right. But, and the funny thing was, even after I laughed at myself, I looked down at the extension cord. I hadn't plugged it in yet. Ooh. Right. So I had a splitter. I went down and plugged it in. It worked just fine. But I mean, how many times do we say to ourselves, oh, I can't believe this thing's not working? And the world, right? Like, it's how you're seeing it. It's a beautiful world.
It's a practice, and it's something you're going to do the rest of your life, because your mind is typically going to wander to that dark place. Oh shit, here, this is what's coming down the pipe. What's next? Instead of bringing it back to where you are that particular moment in time and saying, you know what, I'm still breathing. Everything's pretty damn good right this second. And that's going to take constant work. But really what happens is your ability to recognize yourself going down the rabbit hole and catching yourself and redirecting those thought patterns, that's the practice. You're never going to be, everything's unicorns and rainbows for the rest of your life. It's going to be catching yourself, recognizing that you're going down that unhealthy path and be able to redirect it. And I think that's really the most you could ask for, when you're trying to, quote, recover from PTSD. I even asked the therapist once, what does recovery look like for PTSD? And she wasn't really able to give me an answer. And to me, that speaks volumes. We don't think we know enough about the human brain to know that. Really, what I think is we learn to manage it and reevaluate how you go through life. Once you're given those tools, then your life's going to be 10 times better. I mean, it just is.
I didn't pick up my phone to be rude. I wanted to get to a conversation I had with a gentleman that I didn't speak to a long time. And just two volleys and text back and forth. And he said to me, I said, how are things? He said, good, blah, 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 something about the flu. He goes, but other than that, things are good. How about you? Now, I never tell people things are good, because I don't think good is the proper acronym to describe great. So for me, I don't know, acronym is the right word. No, it would just be the word. Some shit like pronoun. Is it pronoun? Adjective? So I said, I'm great. Like everyone else in the world, I have a million problems, but I'm still the luckiest guy you'll ever meet.
Yeah. That's
I'm not
perfect.
the richest guy. Yeah, dude, I'm not the richest guy you'll ever meet. I'm not the healthiest guy, the best looking guy. I'm pretty fucking funny, but I don't have the funniest guy you'll ever meet. But it's how I see things. And in the 21st minute of my meditation in the morning, that process I've spoken of before is like you said before, it's what are you grateful for? And I just start my 4 children.
Yeah.
I just their faces start, and then I go into something as simple as being in a warm house on a winter day. I'm in a warm house. It's cold out right now. I say, Lord, thank you. I say, I'm appreciative that I'm sitting on a couch in this beautiful house that I worked very hard to get to, and I'm warm. Something as simple as that is very interesting what you're appreciating. We had a guy in yesterday who was a police officer, was charged and ended up subsequently getting imprisoned temporarily while he's waiting trial, got out of jail. But in 3 months, he sat in solitary confinement at a county jail in Florida. And he said, I will never take something as simple as a hot shower for granted ever again in my life.
Yeah.
Why does it take something like that to go through perspective change? because we're fucking spoiled, right? But on top of that, nobody ever told you. Nobody ever told you. Be appreciative of these things. You know, it's very, very. Some of those profound people in my life are ones who are the most compassionate. I told a girl that I know, I said to her on Thanksgiving, I don't know her very long. I said, I'm so thankful that I met you. You are the most compassionate person I've ever met in my life. And I am thankful that I know you, at least know you. And she's doesn't have fame or fortune or anything like that. But when you talk to her, her non-judgment of anybody is amazing. And I learn from people like that. I just learn, and I want to be like them. Right? So you got to work at it, though, right? You know, you got to work at it.
Our integration coach, Christina Muncie, is like that. She's one of these people that can also, whenever I'm having the shittiest day or I'm just explaining something that's horrible, she's able to get me to think, look at it with a different lens or think about it a different way. And you know what? Every single time I bring it up, at the end of it all, I'm like, you know what? You're right. You know, and when I think back, and she had me do this exercise also, think of the most horrific things you've had to endure your entire life. Okay. Get this short little mental list of it. Then sit and think about what good came out of every one of those events. And if you can name, and I guarantee you, initially you're like, oh, there's no way there's anything good that came out of this. And you start to think about some of this stuff, even the worst of it. There's something good that has come out of these traumas. They've taught you something at very least. And if you think about it like that, then you can start to process and think about all these horrific things in a little bit different light. And I think that's super important to remember. You know, what's going's coming. You get some shit wave that's happening in your life, everything's going wrong. At some point, that's going to turn around. And it has every other time too, right? So there's no reason to think otherwise. So I think it's just a lot of being able to recognize the signals that you're starting to go down this dark rabbit hole and be able to turn it around. I think that's really what's in the integration practice. But when we're talking about psychedelic assisted therapy, a lot of times before you could even get to that, you got to dislodge the problem further upstream. If you got some really deep-seated stuff in there and you've tried all these other things, you know, that's the nuclear option. You got to go down this other road, or at least be open to it and think, you know, if you're even thinking suicidal thoughts or any stuff like that, I mean, you got to do something for your family, for everyone else around you. I can tell you your department doesn't give a shit about you. You know, if you go out tomorrow, they're going to replace you, or they're not, you know, if you get defunded, or whatever the deal is. But the bottom line is you got to take control of your own health and your mental well-being. Earlier,
you talked about coming from a very fucked up family growing up, so much so that when you left, you never talked to them again. And it's been, I'm guessing, 30 years, somewhere in the ballpark, right? 52, 35 years of not talking to these people. First thing I would ask you is, have you ever reached out ever again, or you just been running, you know, I don't say running from them, but have you ever made contact in that time ever again?
I haven't, but and that sounds like, you know, sounds really callous and horrible. But when you think about it, what I gained from that was an extended family. I had several families help me get back on my feet, you know, help support me. And what happened is, you know, just because their blood doesn't mean they're your family. I gained a much larger family out of this whole experience. So it's something that, you know, I don't choose to go down that path anymore because there's no value add to me.
I agree. I'm not arguing there.
That's a personal decision. But that being said, I benefited by, you know, getting these other people in my life that actually helped me through it.
Well, that was kind of my question. So the question I had for you is, and when I hear you say that, it resonates with me, right? I explore my childhood a lot. I explore who I am now a lot. I don't know what happens in your late 30s and early 40s that makes you start thinking about a lot of things. I don't know if that was the same time frame for you. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, probably.
And yesterday, my vice president here said to me, well, we're talking on the phone, and I love her to death, Becca. She texted me and said, it's amazing that you're able to stay so calm during so much turmoil. And I said, the house I grew up in was so volatile and so out of control that I think my brain molded that way. So as upset as I am with the way that I was raised, and I will never put my kids through what I went through, and the fact that even now it's not even acknowledged of what it was like to be in that household. And again, it wasn't the worst thing ever, but it wasn't great.
Yep.
The blessing there was I'm able to handle chaos very calmly because I had to my entire life. Well, everybody else was chaotic. I was one of the only people there who was just cool, calm, and collected in this house of insanity. So, that's my blessing in disguise. And your blessing, you believe, is your extended family.
That, and I also believe I'm pretty damn calm in chaos. I think a lot of that came out of base jumping. You talk about when you got your toes poked over the edge of a 3,000-foot wall and you're getting ready to jump off, you're thinking about literally nothing else in the world except what you're about to do, what you need to do to save your life, and if you're going to be alive in the next 30 seconds. So you get this laser sharp mentality of just being hyper-focused and calm. And when you think about the things that get us all riled up in everyday life, if that's not going to immediately hurt or kill me, I'm not that excited about it, right? I could calm down and realize I've been through a lot more stressful situations, and just how do you channel your mind and accept it? And really being chaotic doesn't help anybody, right? The calmer you are, the better decisions you could make. And again, this will also make you a better police officer out in the street. A lot of what we do with our HRD seminars is we introduce stress, decision-making, or elevated heart rate, or things like that. We want to make these guys comfortable dealing with that type of stuff and not go through the motions and check a box that you just did certain things. And that's why it's so important to have that, mixed in with what you guys are doing. Listening to your podcast, I've heard you say many times, a lot of the training that law enforcement receives is garbage. And I tend to agree. A lot of it's great, but some of it is absolutely worthless. And especially a lot of it's a mindset. When you're dealing with canine units, they're a specialized unit. Why aren't they training like every other specialized unit in the world? All you got to do is look at the military. You don't got to recreate the wheel. Watch how any kind of tier 1 or any kind of specialized unit trains. They train with stress. They train with reality. There's a lot of blood, sweat, tears going on, not standing around and bullshitting and drinking coffee. And if you're not training like that, when it does go to shit, you're not going to be able to handle it. I mean, that's just the bottom line. And that's really what I want to drive home, we take this seriously. And, I don't want to care about somebody else's life more than they care about their own. And, I've come across officers like that, when I'm like, I'm here, busting my ass, hopefully to drive home a message to you that if you don't prepare properly, this dog is not going to engage. You're not going to do your job and you're going to die. But I can't make somebody give a shit. Right. So I don't know. You're the one of the few people that I've heard out there on the airwaves that are talking about this stuff as far as the training or lack thereof when we're talking about law enforcement in general.
Well, I appreciate you acknowledging that. I just give a fuck so much. And the reason I give a fuck with so much hope is because I know it can be fixed.
Yeah.
I'm a very, realistic human being. If you told me, hey, tomorrow you could put on shoes if we work on it and you can fly and walk on clouds tomorrow, I go, right, you're out of your fucking mind. Right? Like there's just no way that's ever going to happen. But if you said to me, we can make this job better, we can do better than we've been doing, we can begin with training and significantly reduce the likelihood of constitutional violations, lawsuits, and deaths related to law enforcement. I don't mean the ones that they cause. I'm talking about to themselves or the ones that other people cause towards them. And here's how we do it. I would believe you because I know it to be true. I'm living it and I'm getting the feedback. So for me, it's like a drug now. I'm like, man, how many fucking lives can I save? How fast can I fix this thing? And, honestly, at the end of my life, I at least want to say, I worked with everything that I had. I had to be a good father. I had to be a good friend. I had to do morally correct things. But I look back and my work actually mattered, and we might be able to shift how this whole thing is done. Do I get pushback? Oh, Maron. That's an Italian word in New Jersey. But yeah, man, and then people here are like, oh my God, can you believe this is happening? I'm like, I believe it. I expected it to happen. We're doing something great. And not everybody's going to be on board. And sometimes people who aren't on board have different agendas in place. I don't know what to say. That's part of the deal. But let me go to this question. You said, about being prepared, a callous mind. It's got to be a David Goggins reference. You've got to be a Goggins fan. Is that a Goggins reference?
I don't think so. I don't know.
Okay. Because it's in his book all the time. But battle hardened, we've been through this before. We know we're going to be okay on the other end. We're going to come out okay. We're in situations right now. It's a very difficult 2 years of my life. Very difficult. I'm happy I'm going through it. I'm happy I've gone through most of it. And I just keep saying in my head, it actually goes back to this Kanye West song. And I don't know if you listen to Kanye West, you don't have to acknowledge it. You're not acknowledged. But in the beginning of it, and I don't want to misquote it, it's like, it cannot always be darkness, right? The light will always come back around. You're on a plane. It's only turbulent for so long. I don't care how bad the turbulence gets. The idea that the plane's going down through turbulence, it's untrue. It takes real courage and real resilience to remain calm during turbulent times. And I think that's what's important about being prepared, having a callous mind, and going through things prior to this. And I say to myself, been through shit like this before. I remind people that are looking to me for advice and leadership of what are we going to do? And I say, we've been through this before. This is not our first rodeo in this arena. And we're going to be okay, because people want to take a bite out of our ass, but then they leave. And that ass heals and we get back on the fucking pony and do our thing. And I'm just ready to outwork anybody, outlast anybody. And I'm emotional about what the work that we do. And when you're emotional about something and you're committed like a religion, you're not gonna be able to stop it.
Same here. I mean, we've been in front of over 700 teams in about 3 years, all over the country. I've seen good, bad, ugly all over the place as far as the spectrum with Police K9 teams. But I can tell you what, we've gotten at least several emails or notes back to us saying, hey, your training absolutely saved my life.
It's awesome.
Or my dog's life or whatever. We've gotten multiple things like that. And that gives you the chills. That makes us do what we do. We sure as shit are not going to get rich and famous, working with cops. But that being said, we do this because we believe in it. And I just wish we could do more, and it's really the limitation here is, who we can touch. And really, that's our philosophy.
What made you get into this? Is a few thing for me. This is me. What drew you to base jumping? What was it that you needed in your life that made you put a fucking pack on and jump off a wall?
Well, believe it or not, I got bored of skydiving. I had
shit.
Thousands of skydives, and it became routine. I was an instructor for a while.
I could see that.
But yeah, sneaking around the night and jumping off skyscrapers and taking off like James Bond, it was pretty cool. And then the wingsuits came along, and then instead of falling, you're flying. The whole world changed. But that being said, you're playing with big boy rules. You can do everything right, still get hurt doing it. And at some point, you got to weigh that risk versus reward ratio. And luckily, I was able to bow out of that sport at the right point in time, I think. I've done pretty much everything I wanted to do within it. But yeah, a lot of my friends didn't. And, I don't regret any of it. But that being said, it was time for me just to move on. You
ever go to those indoor skydiving places and show the fuck off? Because that's what I would do if I was you.
Well, that's not real. I mean,
no, I know, but can you go there and do it? Ever see those guys who work at those places? I mean, they could literally like fucking ballerinas. They're amazing in those machines. Can you do shit like that?
Well, you could do it for real too. We did.
Yeah. I'm saying you go in, they're like, hey, are you a beginner? Yeah, no, I don't know nothing. Right. You're like, I don't know. You could do like a TikTok video on it. Right. And then the guy's like, you go in and you just start going berserk. Have you been inside one of those things?
I know exactly what you're talking about. Sorry, my dogs are going bananas here. Yeah, that would be fun. There's people that they roll into jiu-jitsu classes. They're black belts that pretend that they're white belts. Same thing.
Yeah, Tim Kennedy does that. And Tim's a good dude. I'm proud to call Tim a friend. And then you have the guys like they do at the music store, right? The guy's like, oh, can I see that guitar? Right. Yeah. But you should do it, dude. That'd be really cool. Like to go see the look on their faces when you go in and just do some cool shit.
Yep.
Hey, what's it cost to go on this trip, one of these excursions? If somebody had to pay out of pocket.
Are you talking treatment grants?
let's say Dennis Benino wants to go on his own, right? And it's the same thing. It's the place you guys are going to. I don't need the grant money.
Yeah.
What is one person? What do you think it's going to cost ballpark to send somebody to one of these places to do one of these things?
Yeah. So they're expensive. I mean, we purposely picked two of the best ones out there that are basically 5 stars that have medical staff. What I don't want is somebody worrying about their safety, worrying about a language barrier or any of that type of crap. They got enough shit on their plate. I want them to go down there and basically just deal with healing. When you're dealing with like a week-long retreat, they're typically around $5 to $6 grand. For us, what we do is we include the integration work, the prep work, the travel if need be. You know, if some of these guys, I don't want price to be a barrier for these guys to get help. So that's why, you know, the price tag for one person to go, usually within our organization, is going to be close to 10 grand.
Wow.
Yeah, you can go on your own, and there's much cheaper options out there. You know, if you want to go lay in a hammock in a hut in jungle in Peru somewhere, it's going to be a lot cheaper than living in a 5-star bungalow, in Costa Rica. But unfortunately, the way things are moving here in the U.S., it's going to take, even if those programs I talked about earlier with MAPS got okayed tomorrow and they started doing MDMA assisted therapy, you'd have a backlog of 100,000 people trying to get in this program. So the implementation is going to be a problem. So the people that are at their end of their rope don't have that kind of time. And those are the people we're reaching out to. We want to know that there's an option here that can actually help you. And they don't even go down the suicide route. And this is what we're hoping to catch.
What if somebody's sitting around saying to themselves right now, you know what, Ray, I got 10 grand. Can you, if I reach out to you guys, can I buy a spot in a class? What would you tell them?
If they got the millions, I just direct them right to where to go. I'm happy to answer questions for people who have, they want to know what it's like, what it's going to take. Should they just go take the medicine? They think it's going to cure everything for them. I'll tell them like it is, what it's going to be, and give them that kind of info, and then direct them to the places that I would recommend that I've personally vetted. But like I said, I would tell people not to go if they don't have the right mindset. You got to be willing to make a change, like I said before, and you got to understand it's not going to be a pleasure cruise, regardless of how beautiful the area is when you're going. When you're in ceremony, you're in it to win it.
You say it's $5,000 to $6,000 or $10,000. Not a far cry from Disney, my friend. I'm just telling you.
Absolutely not. And I could tell you what, Disney would give me PTSD. It's just being in lines and kids everywhere screaming. No, that's horrible.
It was interesting, Ray. I would have thought the same thing, but I'm guessing you don't have kids, right?
No, just animals.
Yeah, I have. I as nuts as this may sound, the more chaos with children, the better it is for me. I enjoy the chaos. We were at a place this past weekend. I don't think it was smart planning on behalf of the 5 families that we went with. I was not included in the planning. They should have included me in the planning. I would have had some real thoughts on how to do this a little more organized. But I went into a bathroom. One of my kids said, I got to go pee. I said, all right, let's go to the bathroom. So a guy walks in. He's a grandfather. And he goes, having fun yet? This is not the first time somebody said that to me with a sarcastic undertone. And I said, my man, this is like the things that I live for. He goes, do you really? I go, how do you look at these children who are having fun in this fucking cool ass place here in this part of New Jersey? It's a real cool place. And find yourself frustrated with it, right? As a grandfather, you're lucky enough to see your kids here. You're here for a reason. You're obviously not here to play fucking video games and go on carnival rides. I had another guy tell me one time, they have these places that they do inflatable bounces, right? So it's commercial inflatable places. You bring the kids, they go inside, they go fucking haywire for like 2 hours. And prior to recently, they just let the adults go on them too. So I just be in the mix, man. I was really good at tossing children around on some of these things. That was my forte. I got videos where I'll send to you. I can launch a fucking 35, 40-pound kid like a shot put. You got to see me launch these fuckers. And it's funny because you can't get hurt. They love it. It's like a game. And we were going in this one time, and the guy's a friend of mine now. And he goes, yeah, another one of these, huh? Looking forward to this. Sarcasm. I went, bro, I live for this shit. Like, these are the moments that I cherish. And I really, even as simple as today, I had my daughter in the back of my car. She's 3. She was explaining things to me. in the way that she was explaining things and said very, very innocent, like, well, cause then we're going to do this. And then, yeah, that's how we do it. I'm like, oh, really? And she's like, well, yeah, because on Saturday, like, she doesn't know what Saturday is, right? She's like, Saturday, we're going to go to Target, and that's where we're going to do that. And I'm like, we will go. And she's like, yeah, that's because, Dad, that's right. And you can have a coffee there. And I'm like, I will have a coffee there. She's like, yeah, that's right, Dad. So these moments, I'm like, man, I just enjoy them so much. But yeah, Disney, that was my Disney spinoff. I went there too. It depends how you see it and how you feel it. But just so you know, I think it's the perspective how you. I remember one time there were 4 kids simultaneously screaming in our house, crying. All four, for all different reasons. It probably sounded like the same decibel level of a 787 jet engine in my household. And I said to my wife, if anybody who didn't have kids came into this house and heard this right now, they would get castrated. They would literally never have children in their life. Yet to us, this is very, very, we weren't worked up. We're very calm. So there is perspective there.
So believe it or not, I mean, Cesar Milan and I think Kelly Slater are on the board for Rythmia. So there's got a pretty high level clientele that have been down there. The week after I went, I think Tiger Woods was down there.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Same resort.
It's become kind of like the thing for people with money. So this is why it requires a grant for most people that go down there, because it's not cheap. That's why we want to make sure that, price isn't a barrier for these guys. So our men and women have given a lot to our country, or to help us stay safe. I don't want them to have to worry about paying for something like this if it could change their life.
Where can they find out more information about your organization, where to donate, where to find you, everything that you do? Give us the whole spiel.
Absolutely. We are warriorshealingnetwork.org. And then on Instagram, we're Warriors Healing Network 2022. We've got donation links on our website, and we are going to be doing some more fundraising events in the spring. We're probably going to do kind of a warrior for a day thing, or operator for a day thing at a local range here, a private range. I believe we're going to have Eddie Gallagher come up. I went and trained with him down at this place in Florida at Stronghold SOF Solutions. So we'll probably have him up and maybe have a couple dinner fundraising events, and then some other smaller ones that we're planning right now. So just go to those social media and hopefully follow us, and at very least share this with other people that may be able to donate and or need the help. Really, I just wanted to get the word out there so that people understand that there's other treatment options out there, especially if they're dealing with the VA, because I know personally that is not the way to go, and they're not really helping very many people at that organization. They're just overwhelmed.
I also want to say that you're doing wonderful things for the world, and you should be proud of yourself. And coming from the place that you came from to have evolved this far and making those decisions in your life, very impressive. And thank you for what you're doing for the world, Ray.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
I don't have anything else other than I hope I look like you in 11 years. I really do.
Well, we try. I'm not going to get any younger, so.
No, you're hanging in there pretty good, my friend.
You got to work hard for this shit.
I get it, brother. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you much for having me, and good luck.
Hopefully reach out if you need anything, brother. Yeah. Guys, if you're in an area where you're trying to get to our classes, but we're not close to you, fret not. We actually have on-demand training at streetcop.com. You can take that course online right now, and then you could attend that training in the future at no additional cost. You can redeem your voucher, so you get 2 for the price of 1. We don't want to deny you the ability to take this training now, especially knowing that it can keep you safe, at a very minimum, putting bad guys in jail where they belong, and at the maximum, going home to your family. Check out streetcop.com for that offer.